Buongiorno a tutti. Voglio cominciare il mio intervento ringraziando tanto l'IFEL come i professori Galeoni e Ferrari per il suo invito. Sono veramente lieto di essere con voi e grazie anche a tutti voi per la vostra assistenza. Ho distribuito questa mattina il testo del mio intervento, allora soltanto farò un breve esercizio summaristico di quello che ho scritto, ma credo che sarà possibile di fare la distribuzione del mio testo scritto dopo, non so quando. In ogni caso vado a fare il mio intervento in inglese, allora mi scusate se il mio inglese non è veramente corretto o vado troppo veloce per i traduttori. What I want to talk today here, it's the history of a good guy. It's the story of a guy named Spain who done everything that was told to be done in order to solve and to manage the financial crisis. And we will see here how we have tried to implement in our legislation all the requirements in order to reinforce stability mechanisms. But the fact, in my view, and I would like to be specifically descriptive in my intervention, but still, in my opinion, the key point remains, which is how to reverse economic cycle by establishing those stability financial criteria and create growth and employment. So the key point still is how to generate appropriate economic and policy measures that will allow us to maintain our social status, our social welfare state. Obviously, I have no answers to that, as I suppose that very few people have that in mind. So this is the summary of what I want to do. Obviously, I have no time, so please excuse me if I just skip some of the parts. Just starting by the constitutional framework, as you probably know, Spain is a decentralized country that has is structured itself territorially by central state, autonomous communities, and local entities. Local entities are granted financial sufficiency according to the Constitution, and that sufficiency is clearly different from financial autonomy that is granted to autonomous community, because local entities have only institutional autonomy, which means that local entities have to have sufficient means in order to perform the functions, and they have to be funded through own taxes and participations. But the fact is that a great majority of the funding of local authorities nowadays come from participation for the state resources. So therefore, just by, on the one hand, establishing how much they will receive, and the other, how much they can spend, obviously put local entities in a difficult financial situation in order to manage with the increasing number of functions that they are told to serve for by the different laws developed by the state. Obviously, the Constitutional Court recognizes that they have the right on those resources of full availability of resources and the ability to decide destiny of funds without unduly conditions. But one of those unduly conditions, it's the one derived from the stability, for the budgetary stability pact that has been developed by the general law of financial stability or budgetary stability, and that has already been set by the Constitutional Court this year in July and October, decisions 13411 or 15711. And moreover, there is a new article which is Article 135 of the Constitution, that was implemented, was approved this September after only 1 month of debate in the Parliament during August, which is the vacation month in Spain. Obviously, in order to represent or to face the demands coming from the Euro Pact. The fact is that this new article constitutionalizes the budgetary stability principle. It makes explicit recognition of the EU surveillance mechanisms, both in the definition of the structural deficit by the EU bodies and the debt levels established by the Treaty of the Functioning of the European Union. But nevertheless, there will be an organic law, not an ordinary law as now happens, that will determine the maximum structural deficits to be attained by the state, and most importantly, how this deficit will be distributed among the different territorial entities. But that means that it will be the state that will have control on that distribution mechanism. And moreover, there will concrete the exceptions to those structural deficit constraints. Moreover, it establishes absolute priority, whatever it means, payment for public debt. I assume that that doesn't mean that we will be able to create money to pay the debt. Which is obviously not the case. The coordination mechanisms of public finance in Spain are mainly defined by a state, because the Constitutional Court has already said that the state is competent to define the limits under which local entities may exercise financial competences, resources, and expenses. And we find this main framework in two types of legislation. On the one hand, the Budgetary Stability General Law that was introduced or was approved in 2001 in order to make the stability and growth criteria in order to become a member of the Euro, which has been amended according to adapt to different economic situations and specifically different needs of the public sector in order to meet those criteria. And the law of the local public finance that establishes specific constraints specifically for the debt instrument for local entities. The basic constraints as regards the public finance of the local entities are found in the local public finance law. And it recognizes that local entities must accomplish the stability principle both initially at the moment of the approval of the budget and also the execution, because increase of credits, decrease of credits needs to be properly compensated with the amount of resources. Also, the budgetary amendments are more strict for local entities than for the state. It is not only sufficient to create an obligation, but the local entities must have the proper credit in order to generate such a bigger expense and the corresponding measure for the decreasing resources. Also, it has the framework for using debt as a means of financing, this distinguishing between long-term debt transaction and short-term debt transaction, and it attributes to the president or the plenary different faculties in order to use debt instruments to cover financial needs. It is important also to note the last point of that transparency, which is local entities are responsible for their own debt. But it doesn't say anything about what happens if a local entity goes bailout. Who will be responsible for that? The law doesn't say so, and implicitly it says that, well, they should not be able to do that way, but it may happen. There are also basic constraints for debt when it is used by local entities, and this is also only a summary that you will find a description of those. Basically, the constraints refer